My name is Mike Maunder. I'm Head of Life Sciences and an Executive Director here at the Eden Project. So my path here actually started when this place was being built. And I was seconded from Kew Gardens to come down and work with Tim Smith, the founder, and help him put this together. So I was very privileged to see the project form in the pit and now come back after quite a few years to join the team. And in the interim time, I've worked with botanic gardens and national parks and conservation groups, both in the UK, the Middle East and the US. You could trace the Eden Project more or less back to the sort of early Renaissance botanic gardens, the Hortus Conclusus, which was a space where you went, an enclosed volume, a walled garden often, where you went not just to see the plants, but in effect you were in the early Google laboratories. You're in a place of scientific but also cultural and theological discussion. Eden Project is the 21st century version of that, where we're looking at a location, a destination, where people can come and just look at the plants, can come and have a good lunch, or they can take it all the way and talk about the future in their lives and how they will live a sustainable life in their generation, perhaps a future generation. So it's available on all levels. And that was Tim Smith's vision when he founded it. Tim was in the music industry. He was an archaeologist before that, and so an innate sense of show, with a little bit of P.T. Barnum in there, but also a very keen intellect. So this is not just a showground. There's a lot of intellectual investment in here, but ultimately we want people to come in and be sparked, be inspired by something they've seen, something they've heard, something they've talked about, and to carry on that conversation to the point where lives change.
We're in a pit here. So you referred to that earlier. So yeah. How did that happen?
Well, this is a post-industrial landscape. This is an old China clay pit, and China clay was dug out of this pit for the paper industry and for ceramics. Those industries disappeared, and this part of Cornwall is littered with these post-industrial wastelands, for want of a better term. And it also means that Cornwall has lost most of its economic strength. It's now agriculture and tourism industry really disappeared 20-25 years ago. And so the Eden Project was set up really to bring income, money, economic opportunities to what was then one of the poorest parts of Europe, which was this part of Cornwall. So this pit, if you'd looked at it at about 1998, would have just been a big muddy hole. A few little fringes of birch trees around the edge, and then this strange grey lake at the bottom. And between then and 2001, it was landscaped, and these great biomes were put in. And the biomes are all about the plants that sustain us and feed us on a daily basis that you don't think about, that you pick up in the supermarket, but you don't know has actually come from Peru or Turkey, or originally came from Yemen. We forget about the stories behind the food, and we want to get back to those stories about the food. Because if you want to get concerned about the environment and you want to build a better future, start in the kitchen with things you know and with things you have control of, and then the conversation can gradually get around to the Okavango or the Amazon or the Serengeti or Yemen. But start with things very familiar that we use on a daily basis. And so you can walk through a grove of coffee trees, you can see our chocolate trees, you can see tea, you see the herbs of the Mediterranean. And it also talks about our 5,000-7,000 year history with agriculture and economic plants, which I think is a key definition of our species.
My class is oriented around, it's solution oriented.
Yeah.
It starts with the problem, and then it moves to what are the characteristics of an effective solution. And because what we find is that there are a lot of solutions out there, but not all of them stick very well.
Yes.
For various reasons. So I see this as a solution in different ways, from the standpoint of its mission, and also from the standpoint of how it actually happened here, that it was possible to happen here.
Yes.
And so maybe you could shed a little bit more light on that. What did Tim and his allies and coalition have to do to get to where it is now?
Well, the early goal and the initial goal was to bring economic transformation to Cornwall, and that was through local jobs and tourism. So we've just got back to 1 million visitors again after a little bit of a lull. And so you could say in terms of bringing money into the county, we're working. We're getting 1 million visitors, and they're every income bracket you can name. So a lot of it is high end, but a lot of it is also families on a budget that will stay in small local hotels and bed and breakfasts, and that's a very effective way of getting money into the community. And Tim has made the joke that he basically counted the number of houses with new double glazing in their windows on his way to work as an index of the effectiveness of Eden in getting money in. And we make a point of trying to employ as many local folk as possible so that we get that money locally. And what's happened is we've created an extraordinary cadre of staff here that are totally into Eden. And there are Eden ambassadors into the community because they own it, it's theirs, and they will talk about it and they project the Eden ethos into all of their conversations outside of Eden. So one goal was lifting up the economy in Cornwall, and I think we're continuing to deliver on that, but there was a bigger goal, a global goal, which was about bringing a sense of optimism about the future and looking at ways of improving the future. And we're agonizing and honing our response to that on a daily basis. We could just argue 1 million people in, 1 million people spent 2 hours, 1 million people out, somehow improved, somehow inspired, and off they go. Well, we don't know. So we're looking at ways of engaging in dialogue with our guests so that we get feedback on what they liked, what they saw, what impressed them, what inspired them, what upset them. We're doing more and more work with communities, both here in Cornwall and globally, and that often is based around human health and well-being. So now, for instance, we work with local doctors. They will prescribe Eden. So you go to the doctor with diabetes, for early onset, first stages of early onset diabetes, and you want to go on a weekly walk 2 times a week, long walk, 5 miles. You want to start gardening and grow your own vegetables. You want to build those skills for your health and well-being. Your doctor will give you a prescription and you'll come to Eden and hand that in. And you will be in a walking group or in a gardening class as basically horticulture as preventive medicine. So the other thing we're doing is we're working with literally hundreds of thousands of communities in the UK on a thing called the Big Lunch, which is all about bringing communities together. Loneliness is one of the modern scourges. And this is all about community lunches. And I think well over 4 million people joined in last year. So there's many, many things we're doing. What we're anxious to do is to actually quantify that impact and look at it long term. But there is a need for the fundamental theatre and to get people to open their eyes. And they'll only open their eyes through inspiration and through enjoyment. No one can be forced to open their eyes. So we've got a new exhibit on the microbiome coming up. We've got the planned exhibit on co-evolution of humans in agriculture. And we've got the world's largest collection of economic plants where you can see where your food comes from. And at the same time enjoy lovely gardens, reasonably good food, reasonably clean toilets, all the necessities of a visit.
Yeah. We had a conversation earlier about the agonizing, as you referred to, that you're doing around the not the mission, that's set, and then maybe you could kind of repeat your understanding of the mission, but also not so much that, but the implementation, like how does it manifest?
Yeah.
That's where the agonizing is happening. So maybe you could speak a little bit to that.
Yeah. So the Eden mission is connecting people with the living world and with each other. It's always a test for anyone in an institution whether they can remember their mission. So I'm pleased I got there in the end. So thank you for the reminder. So the mission is fixed, and we have a mandate from the UK government because we were lottery funded. So we're a public institution. So we have we're mandated to do various things. But like any institution, we worry as to whether we actually do them or not. So to bring 1 million people in, you don't need to want to change the world. You can have roller coasters and flamingos and bring 1 million people in and not change the world. So we want to have a profound influence and impact on people's lives, beneficial impact on people's lives. And so we're really curious as to are we doing that? And that's going to take us into a new area of really dialogue with our guests, our visitors, our communities, and working out what they want to know and how we can help them get to know it. And us moving from a slightly detached concern about big issues to a much more engaged version of big issues. So we can talk about climate change. Well, if actually we're going to do something about climate change, we've got to rebuild forests and we've got to reduce electricity consumption. So now we're working with various groups around the world looking at forest regeneration and forest restoration. So that links our rainforest biome with stuff on the ground. And so it becomes real. We're not just pontificating, we're investing and demonstrating. And then similarly for the electricity and power use, we're working with at least one power company to encourage reduction of power use in houses. So that's part of that is actually installing batteries and improved hot water tanks into houses. So we can count the number of houses, we can measure the reduction in electricity use, and in a year or two we'll be able to say X hundred hectares of forest is being regenerated or restored as a result of our investments and our partnerships and our collaborations. So it's going from storytelling, which is in itself immensely powerful, but then using that storytelling to get it into action and to deliver.
I just recently read about an Eden project being built in China. And then I read that there are plans for Eden projects elsewhere in the world. Could you give us a little bit more insight into what that looks like?
Yes, that's part of my job. So it's very interesting. Almost as soon as Eden opened, there were knocks on the door. Can we have one, please, from various parts of the world? And Tim Smith said, I don't really want to do that until we've worked out how we really run this one. So over the last 3 years, Tim has been working with various Chinese partners exploring this, and now it's gone beyond exploration, and we're now contracted and there's plans, and within the next few months we'll be breaking ground on projects. And they're not going to be clonal duplicates of Eden. They're going to be driven in their mission and their design by local issues, local problems, local culture. So a Chinese Eden will look fundamentally different and feel fundamentally different to a UK Eden, which is absolutely right and proper because it's serving that population. And the reason we're excited to work in China is the biggest single mass of humanity on the planet, with a huge ability to influence the future of the planet. And if we can engage with the Chinese population on issues like water security and water pollution and soil restoration, we can make a difference. And that's what's driving our interest in working in China. So there's two projects. One will have a water focus and one will have a soil focus. And so we're using these projects to explore big issues with a huge audience and to bring some of the Eden flair and exhibitory and education into the Chinese cultural community as well. So it's all driven about taking the messages here and using it as an opportunity to revise what we're doing and bring in new technology. Since we're effectively now 20 years old, this is an opportunity for us to actually upgrade our capability and to bring in the latest technology. So we're looking at virtual reality as a teaching tool for some of these exhibits. And how do you get across the microscopic life of a soil to an audience of 30,000 people that might pass through it in a day? You know, a traditional museum exhibit will not work. It has to be something different. So that's what's driving us. But it's also not going to be the big capital projects. We're also working globally with small-scale partners who, like communities in Malawi on baobab harvesting. So we are working with communities in Malawi and Zambia and soon Kenya, looking at sustainable agricultural products that we can market and sell here in the UK at a premium, and then push that money back to support the local farmers and to support environmental initiatives on the front line. Fundamental stuff like soil, water and charcoal, the fundamentals of life in that part of the world.
That's incredibly ambitious.
Yeah.
It's rooted in the success of what and that success was hard won, I'm sure.
Yes.
Many aspects of that trial and error and as entrepreneurs call it, failing forward, that kind of thing.
Yeah, yes, I think that's absolutely right.
And so now you've got, I can't imagine it's an enormous staff. So how does that work, connecting to the rest of the world and supporting these kinds of initiatives in this sounds like organic way, but it's asking a lot. So how does that play out?
So we've actually had to build a new team to service that, because you need a dedicated team to operate an attraction for 1 million people. You can pull a little bit of time and energy and initiative off the folk who are doing the operations, because they'll understand what the new place has to do, but then you've got to supplement that with a new team. And we partnered with professional architects companies who have experience in managing these big projects, and we also now have a new team of people with experience in managing complex projects, and particularly experience of working in China. So it's taken Eden into a new complexity, but also bringing in a lot of new skills. And at the same time, we have to make sure that we keep the Eden ethos and Eden identity totally sort of integrated into these expanding teams. And so far that's working very well. We seem to be able to recruit the people with the right ethos.
That's wonderful. So Eden, the name Eden, is a Judeo-Christian term. And so how does China feel about that? Are they going to come up with their own name? Because they seem to be pretty good at that.
Yes. It's always been interesting. I remember having conversations with Tim right at the beginning about, are you sure you want to call it Eden? Will it be interpreted as an evangelical institution? He said, no, I want Eden as just as a symbol of a garden, of a place of hope, as semi-mythical. And it's worked against all my expectations. That taught me something quite important. And even though it has a theological context, most of our visitors don't make that connection. We're just Eden, the place to go to see something remarkable. And we are having very careful conversations with the Chinese about logos, ownership, branding.
Right.
And they have, as far as I can tell, it's not an area I'm directly involved in, have not expressed any concerns about it. It is Eden.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. And just finally, if you could have a magic wand and wave it in the general vicinity of all of these projects and potential projects, what do you see happening?
Well, even with a magic wand, I see an extraordinary amount of work over the next few years as we get these projects rolling, because it's partly about the architecture, it's partly about the design, and it's partly about the storytelling. But actually, it's the software of each institution, the culture, that is going to be the hardest thing to establish and the most valuable thing to establish. So let's say we've got 6 locations in the next 5 years. Each one of those needs to be the same cultural or its equivalent for that location, but share the same ethos with us. And that's going to be a really interesting exercise, because we're part cultural institution, we're part tourist destination. So that means working with everyone from the ticket collectors and the food and beverage staff all the way through up to the executive to create that shared vision of what Eden is. And that's going to be a phenomenally interesting training, cultural development program. And that's something I'm looking forward to, and we'll have to do it on quite a big scale.
Yeah, and it seems like the knowledge that's going to come from that is something that a lot of people need, a lot of organizations and individuals interested in making this kind of change happen in their own ways around the world need.
Yes.
And so there'll be a lot of hunger for that wisdom. There
is, and we're also looking at our colleagues and our partners, because there's a lot to learn from them. So it's really a hybridization program. There's a lot of because our way of what I think would be a perfectly splendid exhibit could quite likely just completely fail in other parts of the world. So I've got no sense of really knowing what we're doing. It's taking our interests, our passion with local teams that know what works in other parts of the world and coming up with these hybrids. And that's going to be very interesting.
Exciting work.
It's going to be fun. I mean, plant a lot of trees in the process and change some lives and regenerate soil on a big scale. You know, the indicators I'm very excited about. You know, can we have a couple of endangered species projects at each location? Can we get 500 hectares of forest regenerated associated with each project? You know, these are the indexes we're talking about, the indices we're talking about. And we're playing around with them at the moment.
That's brilliant. Well, thank you very much.
No, Michael, thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, thanks for coming.
It's inspiring. Thank you.
It's terrifying.